Imagine meticulously applying this really expensive moisturizer every single day to, the most sensitive skin on your body, only to find out that the ingredients are scientifically designed to pull water out of your cells.
Oh, yeah.
Like you are actively dehydrating yourself while trying to heal.
And the marketing behind these products is just incredibly persuasive, especially when they promise to fix these deeply personal, um, often taboo concerns that people are just too embarrassed to ask their doctors about.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to your custom-tailored deep dive.
Yeah.
As a curious and thorough learner, you want to get past the marketing hype of this massive, multi-billion-dollar intimate health industry.
We have a really huge stack of sources today. Clinical guidelines from the British Menopause Society and Macy Physiotherapy Clinic reports, and peer-reviewed urogynecology journals.
Yeah, and our mission today is to answer a highly specific question. Can vaginal moisturizers improve perceived tightness? Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get into the creams and gels, we really have to define what is actually happening anatomically when someone feels, quote-unquote, loose.
Right, exactly.
Like, are we talking about muscle stretching out or something else entirely?
Well, we're actually talking about two entirely different biological systems that constantly get conflated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The first system is vaginal laxity. The clinical definition in our sources is a physical structural reduction in tightness, and this involves the muscle layer.
So if the vagina is a tent, this is like the tent poles. Are we talking about the poles or the canvas?
Yes, the 10 poles. Think of it as the framing of the structure. It is most often caused by the mechanical stretching and tearing of childbirth. I mean, one study we looked at noted that 58% of first-time mothers report some form of sexual dysfunction. Yeah, including significant laxity a full year after delivery. It leads to air trapping, reduced sensation, and decreased sexual satisfaction.
But wait, if 58% of new mothers experience that structural stretching, what has happened to women who haven't given birth recently or, ever, but suddenly during menopause start feeling that exact same loss of tone?
Right.
Because the muscles haven't stretched mechanically, so what changed?
Well, the mucosal tissue itself changed. So this is the second system. Atrophy, or what the medical community now calls genitourinary syndrome of menopause, or GSM.
Right, GSM.
When estrogen levels plummet, which happens in menopause but also during breastfeeding or following certain cancer treatments, the vaginal mucosa fundamentally alters.
Okay, how so?
Estrogen is basically the biological signal that keeps fibroblasts active. And fibroblasts are the cellular factories that manufacture collagen and elastin.
So without estrogen, the body essentially loses the blueprint for making that elastic tissue. The factory just shuts down.
The fibroblasts literally go dormant. They transform into these inactive fibrocytes. So the tissue stops producing robust collagen and it thins out dramatically.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, you lose vaginal rugae.
Rugae.
Yeah, they're the natural accordion-like folds in the vaginal wall that allow it to expand and contract dynamically. Without those folds, the canal becomes shorter, narrower, and much more rigid.
Wait, I am struggling to picture this. How does a narrower, more rigid canal translate to feeling loose? Shouldn't a narrower canal feel tighter?
You'd think so, right? But what's fascinating here is how the brain interprets a lack of friction.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, when those mucosal walls thin out and lose their plump, moisture-rich volume, there is simply less physical tissue mass inside the canal to create friction during intimacy.
Ah, I see.
This profound loss of mucosal volume, combined with the complete loss of elasticity, heavily mimics the sensation of structural looseness. The muscle framing underneath might be perfectly intact, but the interior lining is so dried out and thin that the entire environment feels compromised.
Okay, that makes so much sense. And just to clarify, based on the clinical guidelines, a feeling of looseness is very different from a prolapse, right?
Entirely different, yes. Laxity or atrophy are changes in sensation, tone, and tissue volume. Pelvic organ prolapse is a physical medical diagnosis where the pelvic floor muscles are so damaged that organs like the bladder, uterus, or rectum actually collapse and bulge into the vaginal space.
Okay, got it. So if the feeling of looseness is often caused by the tissue, this interior canvas losing its plumpness and friction, we have to look at how we treat that lining, like the skincare routine for intimate health.
Exactly.
And the British Menopause Society guidelines draw a very hard line between a moisturizer and a lubricant.
They do, and confusing those two is the first major trap. A lubricant just sits on the surface. Its only job is immediate friction reduction during sexual activity.
Right.
But a vaginal moisturizer is fundamentally different. It is designed to be absorbed into the cells. You use it regularly, usually 2 to 3 times a week, to alter the fluid content of the epithelium and restore long-term cellular elasticity.
So it's like putting on a daily hydrating face serum
Mhm.
versus just, using a makeup primer right before you walk out the door.
That's a great analogy. And in the world of vaginal moisturizers, the superstar ingredient pulling the heavy clinical weight across all our sources is hyaluronic acid, or HA. It is a naturally occurring glycosaminoglycan.
A long chain sugar, right. I know HA from those really expensive face serums.
Mm.
But how is it actually functioning on a cellular level in vaginal tissue?
Well, its primary superpower is its binding capacity. A single HA molecule can hold up to 1,000 times its weight in water.
1,000
A
times.
1,000 times. So as your natural estrogen drops and your body's own HA production declines, applying it topically through a gel or a dissolving insert allows those molecules to bind directly to the vaginal mucosa.
Okay.
It literally draws moisture from the surrounding capillaries and tissues, pulling water into the cells and holding it there, which creates a protective, plumped-up barrier.
And the clinical trials in our stack showed this isn't just like a cosmetic plumping effect, right?
Yeah. Not at all. Multiple randomized controlled trials demonstrate that for mild to moderate symptoms of GSM, vaginal hyaluronic acid is roughly comparable in efficacy to low-dose vaginal estrogen.
That is incredible.
It is. It significantly reduces itching, burning, and pain during sex by physically restoring that moisture barrier. For breast cancer survivors, or really anyone avoiding hormones, it is a profound first-line defense.
But okay, this brings me back to that scary hook I mentioned at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Because the sources had massive warning labels about osmolality.
Yes, they did.
So if you're listening right now, you buy a highly concentrated HA product because you just assume more is better.
Yeah.
Are you actually dehydrating yourself?
You are, yeah. Osmolality refers to the concentration of dissolved particles in a fluid. The natural osmolality of vaginal secretions is quite low, around 260 to 290 milliosmoles per kilogram.
Okay.
The World Health Organization strictly recommends that vaginal products stay below 380, with an absolute maximum limit of 1,200.
Wait, so what actually happens to the cells if you use a gel packed with glycerin or heavy preservatives that pushes the osmolality way over that 1,200 limit?
Well, the laws of osmosis dictate that water moves to dilute the highest concentration of particles. So if you introduce a hyperosmotic gel into the vagina, the gel essentially demands water.
Right.
It aggressively pulls intracellular water out of the vaginal mucosal cells to dilute itself.
Oh my gosh. So instead of the gel hydrating your tissue is hydrating the gel. It's like trying to water a wilting houseplant with ocean water. You're just sucking the life right out of it.
That is exactly what happens. The cells literally shrivel. This causes microscopic damage, sloughing of the tissue, and makes you incredibly susceptible to microtears and infections.
Wow.
It actively worsens the dryness you are trying to treat. You must look for isoosmolar products that match your body's natural state, and you must maintain an acidic pH between 3.8 and 4.5 so you don't kill off the protective lactobacilli bacteria.
Okay, so assuming you find a perfectly formulated pH-balanced isoosmotic HA moisturizer, we have to answer the core question of this deep dive.
Let's do it.
Does drawing all that water into the cells and plumping up the tissue translate to actual tightness? Can a moisturizer improve perceived tightness?
The verdict from the medical literature is twofold. Yes, it improves the perception.
Okay.
By restoring the volume and thickness of the mucosa, the walls of the canal are physically closer together. You have plump, resilient tissue that provides natural friction again.
Makes sense.
To you, and often to a partner, the dramatic reduction in that dry, loose sensation feels exactly like a restoration of tightness.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because the perception of tightness isn't the same as structural muscle tightness.
Exactly. The structural reality is the no part of the answer. Moisturizers cannot alter muscle fibers. They repair the lining. They cannot repair a torn or weakened pelvic floor.
So if you go online and you see one of those over-the-counter tightening creams or gels that promise to physically shrink the vagina within minutes, what are you actually buying? Are you just paying for an optical illusion?
Essentially, yeah. You are usually buying a temporary astringent like witch hazel, alum, or oak gall extract.
Yikes.
These ingredients cause proteins in the mucosal tissue to temporarily coagulate and constrict. They actively pull water out, drying the tissue to create a tight, highly frictional feeling.
Wait, so they work by intentionally causing the exact dehydration problem we just talked about avoiding?
Yes. They dry the tissue to create a spasm or swelling that feels tight. It has zero clinical benefit for muscle tone, lacks long-term data, and is incredibly disruptive to the vaginal microbiome, often leading to severe irritation or bacterial vaginosis.
Unbelievable. So if you want to fix the underlying muscle, if you have actual mechanical laxity from childbirth, what is the real evidence-based fix?
The only clinically validated non-invasive treatment for actual muscle laxity is pelvic floor physiotherapy. Specifically, progressive resistance training of the pelvic floor muscles, commonly known as Kegel exercises.
I have to admit, I got a little confused reading the physio reports here,
Hmm.
because one of them noted that Kegels don't actually tighten the vaginal muscle itself.
Right.
How does doing a Kegel make you tighter if it doesn't affect the vaginal muscle?
Well, the vagina itself is a fibromuscular tube made of smooth muscle. You cannot voluntarily flex it like you flex your bicep. But that tube is surrounded by a complex, hammock-like sling of skeletal muscles, most notably the levator ani.
Okay.
When you perform a Kegel correctly, you are contracting and strengthening that outer sling.
Ah, okay, so the levator ani is like a dynamic corset wrapped around the outside of the tube.
A dynamic corset is exactly right. As you strengthen that outer muscular sling, it bulks up. It provides better continuous structural support to the vaginal walls, which increases the resting tone of the entire canal.
That makes perfect sense.
It also allows for much stronger voluntary contractions during intimacy. That is how you address true structural looseness.
Okay, let's map out the escalation pathway. Say you've been using your isoosmotic HA moisturizer to plump the tissue. You've been working with a pelvic floor physical therapist to build up that dynamic corset.
Right.
But what if it's been 6 months and you are still suffering from severe dryness, pain, or just a profound loss of sensation? The clinical guidelines suggest we move to medical interventions.
Yes, when foundational therapies aren't sufficient for tissue atrophy, the absolute gold standard is local vaginal estrogen.
And that's different from systemic estrogen.
Very different. Unlike systemic hormone replacement therapy, which circulates through your entire bloodstream to treat hot flashes or bone density, local estrogen stays localized. You apply it directly to the vaginal tissue in very low doses via creams, tiny tablets, or rings.
The sources say it physically reverses the atrophy, but how? How does dabbing a tiny bit of cream wake the whole system back up?
It binds directly to the estrogen receptors in the vaginal mucosa, the urethra, and the bladder trigone. Once those receptors are activated, the dormant fibroblasts we talked about earlier, they wake up and start producing collagen again.
Oh, wow.
It also triggers angiogenesis, which is the growth of new blood vessels, bringing vital blood flow back to the area. Furthermore, it forces the superficial cells of the vaginal wall to mature and eventually shed.
Wait, why do we want the cells to shed?
Because as those mature cells shed, they release stored glycogen into the vaginal canal. Glycogen is the primary food source for lactobacilli, the good bacteria.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. The lactobacilli eat the glycogen and produce lactic acid as a byproduct, which drops the vaginal pH back down to that healthy, acidic 3.8 to 4.5 range. It's a complete biological reset.
That is a massive domino effect from just a tiny dose of hormones.
It really is.
But the sources also mention non-estrogen medical alternatives, right, like DHEA and osbemifene. How do those fit in?
So DHEA is a daily vaginal insert. It's an inactive precursor hormone. The magic here is that the cells in the vaginal wall absorb the DHEA and convert it into both estrogen and testosterone right there inside the cell.
Wait, inside the cell itself?
Exactly. It never enters the bloodstream in significant amounts.
So you're giving the cells the raw materials to make their own local hormones.
Yes. And osbemifene operates on an entirely different mechanism. It's an oral pill, but it belongs to a class of drugs called selective estrogen receptor modulators, or SERMs.
Okay, SERMs.
It acts like an agonist, meaning it turns the switch on in the vaginal tissues to thicken them and restore moisture. But it acts as an antagonist, turning the switch off in the breast tissue, meaning it doesn't stimulate breast cells.
Got it. Okay, I think I have a solid grasp on the tissue repair side. But we really have to talk about the technology conflict in our sources, because it was jarring to read.
It's definitely a controversial area.
We have aesthetic surgery journals claiming that energy-based devices, like fractional CO2 lasers and radiofrequency wands, are an absolute miracle for tightening. And then, literally 2 pages later, major medical centers like the Cleveland Clinic explicitly state that non-surgical lasers and RF are not effective for tightening vaginal muscles, they lack long-term safety data, and they cost thousands of dollars out of pocket.
Right.
How are you supposed to navigate that contradiction?
It really comes down to understanding the biological mechanism versus the marketing spin. Energy-based devices work by creating controlled thermal damage.
Thermal damage, like burning.
Yes, a CO2 laser or a radiofrequency wand heats the subepithelial layers right beneath the vaginal surface. This microscopic heat injury causes mild swelling and triggers the body's natural wound healing cascade.
So it's like a controlled forest fire that burns away the old brush to force new, healthy growth.
That's a great way to visualize it. This process is called neocollagenesis. Studies do show this controlled burn can thicken the epithelium, increase that glycogen production we talked about, and genuinely improve the tissue-level symptoms of dryness and burning.
But it doesn't tighten the muscle.
No. If we connect this to the bigger picture of laxity, firing a laser at the mucosal wall fundamentally cannot repair a torn levator antemuscle. If your pelvic floor is damaged from a forceps delivery, a surface-level burn will not rebuild that structural strength.
That makes total sense.
The medical pushback from places like the Cleveland Clinic is aimed at clinics that market these devices as a non-surgical alternative to vaginoplasty or physical therapy. They might rejuvenate the tissue, but they absolutely do not restructure the muscle.
And if the muscle foundation is truly compromised, if you have significant prolapse where organs are actually shifting, that's when you escalate to surgery.
Yes. Surgical options like a vaginoplasty or perineoplasty involve physically cutting away excess tissue and suturing the underlying muscles back together, but the medical consensus treats surgery as a strict last resort.
Because of the risks?
Exactly. It carries high risks of nerve damage, heavy scarring, and can actually cause dyspareunia, which is chronically painful sex. It is generally reserved for severe trauma or prolapse that just hasn't responded to extensive physical therapy.
Okay. So what does this all mean for you? If you're feeling a loss of tone or experiencing dryness, it's not a permanent failing of your body. We've learned that feeling loose is a complex mix of structural muscle changes and the silent drying out of your internal tissue.
Right.
We've discovered that hyaluronic acid is a cellular powerhouse for plumping up that tissue and restoring friction, as long as you avoid the hyperosmotic traps that dehydrate your cells.
Yeah.
And we've seen that true structural tightening requires the active resistance training of physical therapy, not a temporary astringent cream.
It really underscores the importance of a stepwise approach to medicine. Start with the foundational non-invasive therapies like targeted hydration and physical therapy before escalating to local hormones, and keep a highly critical eye on the promises of expensive energy devices.
Before we sign off, there's one final, somewhat bizarre trend pulled from our sources that I want to leave you with.
Oh, the facials.
Yes. We saw multiple references to the rise of the vaginal facial. Spas are now offering aesthetic treatments for the vulva using HA masks, gentle exfoliants, and even LED light therapy.
Which raises a really important question. We've spent the last 20 minutes validating how medically formulated hyaluronic acid repairs internal tissue atrophy. It is highly beneficial. But the vagina is fundamentally a self-cleaning organ.
Right. So at what point does genuine medical self-care cross the line into unnecessary cosmetic pathologization of normal aging bodies?
It's a critical line to walk. When does treating a legitimate, uncomfortable symptom of menopause turn into convincing people that their vulvas need an anti-aging spa day just to be acceptable?
That is something for you to critically evaluate the next time you see a trendy intimate wellness ad pop up on your feed. Ask yourself, are they giving me the tools to restore my biological function, or are they just trying to sell me another insecurity? Thanks for diving deep with us today.